The sun had set long ago as Adam's family journeyed towards Ohio, the GPS, their only guide through the desolate town. Our protagonists, Adam, Emily, 11-year-old Andrea and 7-year-old Bob, had been on the road since the crack of dawn. Their eyes were heavy, their bodies ached, and all they yearned for was a warm bed to rest in for the night. Adam, ever the dutiful husband and father, kept his gaze fixed on the road, searching for a beacon of hope, a motel where his family could retire for the night. The town they found themselves in was nearly empty, devoid of life, save for the occasional flicker of a television set in a distant window. The road was as dark as the night itself, the eerie silence broken only by the hum of their car's engine and the occasional direction from the GPS. At last, the GPS led them to a small motel. It stood alone, a solitary figure in the desolate landscape. The parking lot was as empty as the town, a testament to the isolation they found themselves in. With a sigh of relief, Adam parked the car and, together with his family, entered the motel. The interior was as unsettling as the exterior. It was empty, save for a skinny man with a face that seemed to belong in a horror movie, manning the reception desk. Adam, swallowing his unease, approached the man, asking for a room. The receptionist's eyes flickered past Adam, landing on Emily. His gaze lingered for a moment too long, causing a shiver to run down Emily's spine. Adam, sensing the discomfort, quickly blocked the view and reiterated his request. The man, after a moment's hesitation, handed over a key. It felt cold and heavy in Adam's hand. With a hasty thank you, Adam took the key from the receptionist, ushering his family to follow him quickly. Little did they know what lay ahead in this seemingly harmless motel. The journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Down a long, dimly lit corridor, they reached room 3087, their sanctuary for the night. The key jingled nervously in Adam's hand as he fumbled with the lock, his eyes darting back to the eerie figure of the receptionist. Despite his mounting discomfort, the door remained stubbornly shut. It was only when the receptionist, with his spine-chilling smile, took the key and effortlessly opened the door that they could finally step inside. The receptionist's gaze lingered on Emily, a gaze that felt more like a shroud, heavy and foreboding. Adam, feeling the weight of that stare, moved his family swiftly inside, his heart pounding louder with each tick of the clock. The receptionist, with a final unsettling grin directed at Emily, turned and retreated down the hallway, his footsteps echoing ominously around them. A sigh of relief escaped Adam's lips as he closed the door, shutting out the night's eerie chill and the unnerving presence of the receptionist. The room, though dimly lit and devoid of warmth, was a welcome shelter from the unease that had settled over them. They quickly unpacked a few essentials, the silence of the room punctuated by the rustling of bags and the low murmur of their voices. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, their long day on the road culminating in a hasty meal of sandwiches and chips. The conversation was light, their laughter a stark contrast to the eerie quiet outside their door. As the evening wore on, fatigue began to pull heavily at their eyelids. Andrea and Bob, their energy spent, retired to the small room within, their soft snores soon filling the quiet space. Adam and Emily, seeking the comfort of each other's presence, settled into the main bedroom, the day's events slowly fading into the background as sleep claimed them. As the door closed, leaving them in the quiet of the room, they all hoped for a peaceful night's rest. Little did they know the darkness of the night held horrors they could not even begin to imagine. In the dead of the night, a blood-curdling scream echoed through room 3087. Emily, shaken from her sleep, sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from the sliver of moonlight that trickled in through the gap in the curtains. She stretched out her hand, reaching for the comforting presence of her husband Adam, but instead, her fingers met something wet and sticky. Drawing her hand back in alarm, she looked down to see it smeared with a dark, viscous substance. A horrifying realization dawned on her. It was blood. With a gasp, Emily stumbled out of bed, the cold floor beneath her feet sending chills up her spine. She rushed to the adjacent room where her children, Andrea and Bob, were sleeping. The door creaked open ominously, revealing another blood-soaked nightmare. The beds were empty, the sheets stained with the same terrifying hue of crimson that had marked her own bed. The room was empty. The kids were gone. The darkness seemed to grow denser, wrapping around her like a cold, unfeeling shroud. The lights flickered but refused to come to life, leaving Emily blind in the enveloping darkness. A bone-chilling sound filled the room, a low, ghostly groan that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was a sound that would freeze the blood in anyone's veins, a sound that spoke of unspeakable horrors lurking in the shadows. In a desperate attempt to seek help, Emily rushed to the phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the reception. The line crackled to life, but instead of the familiar voice of the receptionist, a terrifying groan echoed through the receiver. It was louder, more menacing than before, filling her ears and drowning her senses. A chill ran down her spine as she picked up the phone, only to hear a terrifying groan on the other end. Fear, raw and primal, took hold of Emily. She dropped the phone, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized that she was trapped in this nightmare with no escape in sight. A sudden force pushed Emily, causing her to hit the wall and black out. In that chilling moment, as her head collided with the cold, unyielding surface, she realized the horrifying truth. This was no ordinary motel. It was a trap, a twisted game of cat and mouse, where the mouse had no chance of escaping. Caught in the web of this macabre spider, Emily had no choice but to surrender to the darkness that was rapidly overtaking her vision. Despite the fear gnawing at her, she held on to the hope that her family might still be alive. Yet the blood-soaked beds and the ghostly groans echoing in her ears painted a grim picture. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls whispering tales of horror and despair. The eerie silence was occasionally broken by the creaking of the floorboards under the weight of an unseen entity. The very air was heavy with dread, each breath she took seeming to fill her lungs with a cold, stifling fear. As Emily's strength waned, the room grew darker. The once familiar objects around her morphed into grotesque figures, their shadows dancing on the walls in a macabre ballet. The room, now a theatre of horrors, played out the terrifying scenes of the night in unending loops. The telephone, now a lifeless artifact, sat in silence, its ghostly groans still ringing in Emily's ears. The door, once a symbol of freedom, now stood as an impenetrable barrier, mocking her futile attempts at escape. As her consciousness faded, Emily could hear the faint echo of laughter, a chilling reminder of the motel's keeper. The last image that flashed before her eyes was the sinister smile of the man at the reception, his eyes filled with a wicked delight that made her blood run cold. And then there was nothingness, a silence so profound it was deafening. The room, once teeming with life, now stood as a silent tomb, a chilling testament to the night's horrifying events. As Emily's consciousness faded, the room fell silent. The morning sun shone brightly as a newlywed couple cheerfully opened the door to room 3087. The room stood as an oasis of tranquility, a far cry from the horrifying scene that unfolded just a few hours ago. An eerie silence hung in the air, the bloodstains had vanished, and the room was miraculously clean. It was as if the previous night's terror had been wiped away, leaving no trace of Adam's family. In the midst of this chilling calm, the same creepy receptionist lurked in the shadows. His gaunt face wore a wicked grin that sent chills down one's spine. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, were fixated on the new bride. His gaze was unrelenting, almost predatory. As the couple settled into the room, the receptionist made his move. He sauntered up to the open door, his tall skeletal figure seeming to consume the light around him. His voice, a hoarse whisper, sliced through the jovial chatter of the newlyweds. He asked the new bride to call him soon, his words carrying an undercurrent of menace. The bride, taken aback by his intrusive presence, nodded nervously. The receptionist's grin widened as he turned away, leaving the couple in their newfound sanctuary. The door closed behind them with a soft thud, echoing throughout the silent hallway. The newlyweds were left alone, oblivious to the dark history of room 3087. As the day wore on, the motel returned to its state of eerie tranquility. The sun set, casting long, foreboding shadows across the empty parking lot. The lights of room 3087 flickered ominously in the gathering darkness, a stark reminder of the horrors that unfolded the previous night. The chilling story of Adam's family remains a mystery, their fate unknown. The motel, with its eerie silence and ominous aura, continues to lure unsuspecting guests into its fold. As the door closed behind the newlyweds, one can't help but wonder, what happened to Adam's family